Happy Valentine's Day, or as some of my friends call it, Happy Complain About Commercialism Because You're Bitter About Being Single Day. If you're one of those embittered singles, rest assured there are worse things than not being in a relationship, chief among them being in a toxic relationship. Being lumbered with a partner who doesn't appreciate you, manipulates you for their own benefit, or just generally treats you like something they'd scrape off their shoe. Here are 10 cautionary examples of this kind of relationship seen across popular culture. It's Snoozy Nerds! Top 10 Toxic Relationships! Fruits Basket. Such a wholesome, feel-good anime. It has a lovable heroine, a likeable supporting cast, and the antagonistic characters usually get their comeuppance by the end of the episode. Then there's Hiro. He wants to be in a relationship with his cousin Kisa, which causes her to be victimised by the abusive head of the Soma family, and later becomes a bully magnet at school. She starts to feel happier after Toru befriends her. After everything the poor girl's been through, she actually likes having an older sister figure to look after her. So Hiro is constantly victimising Toru, just because he can't stand the idea of Kisa having friends other than himself. Not letting your other half have a life outside of you is one of the main warning signs of a toxic relationship. And don't get me angry about, "Aw, but he's in love!" No, he isn't. He just wants Kisa all to himself. Besides, what does he say when he steals Toru's photograph of her dead mother?
"This must be your mom. She's pretty hot."
So apparently it's okay for him to leer at other women, but Kisa isn't allowed to just be friends with anyone else. He's too much of a dirty coward to defend her against any of the bullies because he's so frightened of someone hitting him back. So he basically concentrates all his efforts on harassing Toru, someone who had done nothing wrong except be a better friend to Kisa than Hiro had ever been. And don't bother defending him going, "Aw, but he's only a little boy." Shut up, stop being such a baby. It doesn't justify his behaviour, and it doesn't change the fact that he is a selfish, possessive, spoiled, rotten little brat whose only redeeming quality is that he might go well with some mint sauce. If you were to ask me what's my favourite Shakespeare play, that's easy. Twelfth Night. It was the first play that I'd ever performed in, and I studied it extensively in preparation to play a younger interpretation of Sir Toby Belch. But as I studied the play, I came to a very startling realisation. Sebastian is not a very nice person! We already see how violent he gets over a simple misunderstanding and how he draws a knife during a fist fight. Olivia mistakes him for Cesario and he immediately takes advantage of her. Now, my drinking chum the Red Fleece once went on a tangent about how he only wants her because she's beautiful and rich. Marrying her for shallow reasons, coupled with the fact that their entire relationship is based on lies, and you have a marriage that simply isn't going to work in the long run. It's no wonder Toby and Maria are the play's true OTP. They have better chemistry, better development, and belligerent sexual tension throughout the entire play. Oh Maria, desist in the belligerence of thy secret affection! Sailor Moon is an example of trying too hard to persuade the audience to admire a character who really doesn't deserve it. In this case, it's Tuxedo Mask. I know what you're thinking. How could the main couple in a shoujo manga be toxic? I shall explain, though bear in mind I'm only talking about the 90s anime adaptation. Basically, he contributes nothing to the relationship. When she's fighting monsters, he acts as though he's the one who saved the day, when really all he did was provide a quick distraction so Sailor Moon could get her second wind. Exaggerating his achievements while undermining his partners. From the first moment they met, they did nothing but hurl insults at each other, and they only started dating because they discovered that they were a couple in a past life. Now, being together just because it was written in the proverbial stars, ignoring a lack of chemistry or common interests, is not the reason Sailor Moon and Tuxedo Mask are on the list, at least not the main reason. The main reason is Mamoru's behaviour in Sailor Moon R. It's bad enough that he constantly shunned Usagi just to indulge their future daughter in her unresolved Electra complex, but upon having a weird dream demanding that he end the relationship, he does it in the most soul-crushing way possible and acts as though she's a horrible person who deserves to die alone. During the story arc, he treats her like dirt while making all her friends think that he's the victim. But the world was being threatened. He didn't have a choice. Actually, he did have a choice. All he had to do was tell her that he had to go away for a while while he investigated this prophecy of doom. Instead, he decided to treat Usagi as if she's the biggest scumbag in Japan. By the way, all those threats to end the world, the one making them was actually Tuxedo Mask's future self. and all because he wanted to make sure their affections for each other were genuine. Something he should know! So he put Usagi through all that emotional abuse and risked preventing their future daughter from being born for absolutely no reason! I'm actually starting to think she would have been happier with Prince Diamond. After having a row with your spouse, it's understandable that you want to go for a walk and cool off, maybe head to a bar, mull over the issue and blow off some steam. But it's really saying something when your wife is so toxic that war-torn Britain with a rationing of the air raids is preferable to being in her company. Yvonne Sparrow is completely self-absorbed and condescending without the intelligence to back it up. Even when she was pregnant, she continued to live an unhealthy yuppie lifestyle of exotic food, wine bars, bistros, curry houses, and business trips to Asia, all of which caused her to miscarry. And she has the audacity to dump all the blame on her husband Gary for not trying hard enough to talk her out of her reckless behaviour. Now, Gary is by no means innocent in any of this. He is, after all, a secret time-travelling bigamist, so he can't help but find his outrage when he thinks Yvonne's cheating on him to be, just a tiny little bit hypocritical. Now, true, there are times when it seems like Gary's been neglecting Yvonne, but the thing is, she actually neglected him first. Before Gary started time travelling, all their family functions were all about her, and she wasn't above using psychological manipulation to get her way. Even over what they had for dinner that night. Yvonne is such a toxic, self-centered narcissist that it's no wonder Gary stopped title dropping the show to her and started title dropping it to Phoebe instead.
Good night, sweetheart.
By the way, an interesting little piece of trivia, since I won't get many chances to talk about this show in the foreseeable future. Yvonne's lawyer is played by Rolf Saxon, who plays another well-known lawyer. And
it's 2 a.m. here, Yvonne. He's gonna be asleep.
You actually might recognise him as the voice of George Stobart in the Broken Sword games.
It smelled like someone had dumped a truckload of fish in a locker room on a hot summer afternoon.
You don't need a degree in psychology to spot a toxic relationship. Dr. Niles Crane is a practicing psychiatrist, and he couldn't see one right under his nose. But again, he couldn't see Maris even when she was right in front of him. For Maris, making her marriage work was an afterthought at most. As her brother-in-law Fraser notes,
Maris has always been spoiled and selfish and led him around by the nose.
Their drawing room is full of gifts that Niles sent to appease Maris for even the most minor inconvenience. This all came to a head when Niles finally put his foot down with her. He told her that it was inconsiderate of her to dash off for a week-long shopping spree without telling him, and demanded an apology. Naturally, she decided to file for divorce.
It's been a long time since anyone said no to you, hasn't it?
Niles did everything he could to salvage a relationship and try to make it work, but Maris continued to live like an overgrown child, throwing all of Niles' efforts back in his face if it interfered with her enjoyment. When the divorce proceedings continued, Maris tried to blame Niles for diminished affections after taking Daphne to a dance. That, by the way, he wanted to bring Maris, who blew him off. By the way, she made this accusation after she cheated on Niles with their marriage counsellor. At first glance, the relationship ending was the best thing that could have happened to Niles, but Maris is so horrible that she tries to monopolise on him even when he's married to someone who actually does love him and is expecting their first child. Sorry Maris, but your little Commodore is not going down with your ship. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films really are amazing. They hold the distinction of being a love story that's actually worse than the Twilight Saga. Peter and Mary Jane's relationship seems to be less about actually liking each other, and more about their own selfish wish fulfillment. Say what you will about Mark Webb's films, but at least Gwen actually likes Peter without the red and blue spandex. You might notice a pattern emerging with Mary Jane's boyfriends. High school quarterback, millionaire's son, rich astronaut, and finally, her favourite superhero. She seems to only go after high-status people, and she only wants to be with Peter because he's Spider-Man. Now, I will admit, it's not entirely her fault. Peter doesn't see Mary Jane for who she is as a person, and only sees that perfect girl next door that he built up in his head. They try to play this cliched anime childhood friend bullshit. But if Peter's such a special friend to Mary Jane, why was she dating the guy who bullied him every day? To answer my own question, it's because Mary Jane only cares about boosting her own ego and is completely obsessed with her own self-image. Look at the third film where she thinks her problem, that is, being fired for being a actress, is worse than, say, the man who killed your adopted father getting out of jail and your best friend trying to kill you over something that was completely beyond your control and refuses to listen to your side of the story. Then we have her childish resentment of Spider-Man's popularity for keeping New York safe. Do you remember that tantrum she had about Spider-Man kissing Gwen on stage? Yes, it was stupid for Peter to go along with it.
You know, for a genius, you can be remarkably thick. What?
But at the end of the day, it was just a performance. Mary Jane claims to be an actress herself. She's kissed people on stage plenty of times. I can't help but find her grudge against Gwen a bit hypocritical when you take into account the fact that she was dating Peter's best friend Harry at the time when they had that famous upside-down kiss. You know, it might actually be a good thing that Sam Raimi never did Spider-Man 4. Can you imagine how much worse he would have made the relationship? Well, to answer my own question about how Raimi could have made Peter and Mary Jane's relationship worse, here's a couple who were clearly inspired by them. The Big Bang Theory's Leonard is a nerdy, socially awkward scientist. Penny is an aspiring actress working as a waitress. The parallels are abundant. Unfortunately, these parallels also include the actress being a spoiled theatre diva who never grew out of her high school mentality. Penny is just a horrible person any way you slice it. She's constantly putting Leonard down because of his geeky interests. Oh, a quick writing tip: if you want people to like your pet character, don't have her preaching hate about the target audience. It's like if Thomas the Tank Engine went around going, "I hate children, I hate children, I hate children." Or he turned around and went, "Get a life, you bloody train spotter!" Ah! Of course, when it comes to criticism, Penny can dish it out, but she can't take it, constructive or otherwise. She will throw tantrums or even break off a relationship outright, even if Leonard just makes a well-meaning suggestion, like the time she broke up with him for suggesting that she go back to college. She plays a victim card and claims that Leonard's calling her stupid, when really all he's doing is giving her constructive criticism. And what about that time when she deliberately ruined Valentine's Day just because she was jealous of her ex-boyfriend getting engaged? Yet your current boyfriend is sitting right there, you know. She has such a ridiculous sense of entitlement that she expects Len to pay for everything for her, even after she's dumped him. She even steals money from his wallet to buy him a birthday present. And the writers still think Len is better off with Penny than any of the other beautiful, brilliant women he's dated. Dr. Leslie Winkle, Dr. Stephanie Barnett, Priya Kupapoli attorney at law. You know, for all Penny's bragging about being too good for Leonard, he's dated doctors and lawyers. It's actually Leonard who's too good for her! To sum up our next entry, take everything I've said about Leonard and Penny, and throw in domestic abuse. Love Hina was one of the earlier anime that became popular in the West, but while other classics like Cowboy Bebop have aged like a fine Scotch whiskey, Love Hina has aged like that yogurt that Eddie started during the Gulf War.
Doesn't taste like banana and peach.
I've mentioned in a previous video that this anime has some of the most unlikable characters I've ever seen, Naru being the worst offender. She's such a violent sociopath that she'll hit Kitaro over any little thing. He accidentally sees her changing, he gets punched and called a pervert. He accidentally brushes the arm of another woman, he gets punched and called a pervert. Another woman tries to force herself on him, he gets punched and called a pervert. He points out an extra syllable in a haiku that Naru's written, he gets punched and called a pervert. Okay, I get it, the production team was head over heels in love with the accidental pervert trope, but like I said about Team Rocket in Pokemon, there's a difference between a running gag and using the same unfunny joke over and over and over again. Naru is just addicted to hitting the poor bloke, even when it's blindingly obvious that he hasn't done anything wrong. Naru's such a spoiled brat that she even hits him for taking her to a meal at a ramen shop instead of to a 5-star restaurant. Like Penny from The Big Bang Theory, Naru is extremely vocal about all of Kitaro's faults, but the one time when he grows a backbone and points out her feelings, she bursts into tears and acts like she's the one being abused. And yet this is still the couple that Ken Akamatsu wants us to get emotionally invested in. You know, Naru's English actress, Dorothy Fang, later went on to voice Sailor Moon villain in the new dub, and her character Anne was still infinitely more likeable than Naru. Gone with the Wind. A staple in A-listed films that gets referenced all the time, and you're just expected to get the reference. It's often considered one of the greatest romance stories of all time. Though I can't really see anything romantic in it though, considering that Scarlett and Rhett are one of the most toxic couples I've ever seen. Their entire marriage seems to be essentially a battle of tempers and egos. They spend the last 40 minutes of the film insulting, shouting at, and belittling each other. It's made very clear from the start of the film that Scarlett O'Hara is not exactly the sort of person you want to spend an afternoon with, let alone your entire life. Considering that she stole her own sister's fiancé and spent most of her marriage to Rhett trying to steal her cousin's husband. Rhett, on the other hand, is a gambler, a womanizer, and a drunkard! There are some things you just don't say to your wife. Maybe you'll get lucky and miscarry, being chief among them. Not to mention he forces himself on her during a heated row. It doesn't matter if you're married, it doesn't give you the right to do that if she says no! I'm honestly surprised that Rhett is considered the quintessential romantic hero. Maybe people just got a bit overexcited by Clark Gable's reckless use of the word damn. The Simpsons once received a lot of complaints for singing an inappropriate song about the city of New Orleans. I've never actually been there myself, but it actually looks like a good place to visit. The food, the cocktails, the hot jazz music. I think the reason for the song is that the only person from New Orleans they were familiar with was Stanley from A Streetcar Named Desire, because the way he treats his wife Stella is nothing short of putrid. He has a deep sense of entitlement, holding a vendetta against Blanche just because he thinks he should get a share of the money from the sale of hers and Stella's childhood home. Stanley is a control freak, surrounding himself with weak-willed people who he can manipulate or beat up if he doesn't get his way. Including Stella, again, while she's pregnant. And no, Stanley, screaming her name with heaven-splitting violence doesn't excuse it. Honestly, Stanley and Stella's train wreck of a marriage would have to be number one on my list, regardless of my criteria. Because I doubt you can get any more toxic than forcing yourself on your wife's sister while your wife is in hospital having a baby. If only Stanley's friends had kept his head under the water for longer, they could have presented a lot more stinking, rotten, vomiting bile in New Orleans. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my list of the top 10 toxic relationships. Let me know of your choices in the comments section, because I'm actually considering doing another one next year. Cheerio!